joy to get to know you and to have some conversations about things. My own family has a long history of journeying far and wide. My mother literally returned yesterday from Burma. She spent the previous week on the Irrawaddy River. She is in her, well, let's just say, she was born in the very early 1930s. And so she continues to be someone who is very interested in and passionate about the rest of the world. My grandfather helped build the Panama Canal. And my father spent most of his life living on the docks and working in international commerce. So the gift that you have brought to the United States and to all of us around the world, by coming here first, briefly, to understand the merchant marine and to get an education and to become skilled, but now the contribution you make back, not just through a foundation in education and scholarship in Bangladesh, but also through a very skilled and very important system around the world that helps make sure that commerce is done well and is done right, that the products that come into our country and many other ports around the world are cleared and inspected properly, but now also that you are engaged in advocating for improving the quality of life of so many in Bangladesh. There was a real tragedy, as we all know, last year that cost over 1,100 lives and refocused many around the world on workers' conditions and on workers' rights in Bangladesh. And the United States, I think, has an important role in continuing to press for a real democracy, a vibrant democracy, not one where we sort of ping-pong back and forth between two competing parties and two families that have held positions of leadership now, but to actually open it up in a way that creates a long-term positive path for the very hardworking people of Bangladesh. So just a few points, if I could briefly, and then I'm really interested in your questions more than I am in a long speech from you. I serve on the Budget Committee, the Appropriations Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Foreign Relations Committee. I have been a senator now, just getting into my 4th year. I spent 10 years in county government before that, so those of you who are working through the joys and struggles of zoning boards and the local improvements and of tax ratables, it was a great foundation for the U.S. Senate because every vote I cast made somebody mad. It's a good way to learn about how to engage your constituents. I am from, as Gula mentioned, a very small state. We have 800,000 people in our entire state. But part of what makes it important that I continue traveling around the region and country and asking others for their support, for which I want to thank you, is that like New Hampshire, I am in a state where we have a very small state and the amount of financial support for candidates from my state is very limited. But we are controlled by a very expensive media market. If you want to succeed in politics in Delaware, you have to take out TV ads in Philadelphia, which means 90% of the ads are seen by people in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Not that that's bad, but they can't vote for me. And it costs $1 million a week. Some of you know that I ran against a woman named Christine O'Donnell. I actually initially ran against Mike Castle, a very seasoned, moderate Republican who I actually like. I've been friends with for years. And had I lost to him, I could have slept at night. Not comfortably, not immediately, but eventually. But when Ms. O'Donnell, who had to declare on national television that she was not a witch, that was her opening line, when she won the primary unexpectedly on September 15th, it put us in a very different place. Just a quick reminder, she outspent me 2 to 1. She raised $1 million in her first day as a candidate. She spent $7.5 million, nearly all of it on that Philadelphia TV. It was so expensive, just beating me up senseless. And because I had had a different type of race up until September, I only had $3 million to spend. This time, I am much more optimistic that I have a clear path. I have an opponent, but someone who has modest resources and background, and we'll see if anyone else gets in. There's others looking at it fairly hard. In this environment, people who can fund with their own resources a big campaign can get in very late. The filing deadline in Delaware isn't until the end of August, and so my concern is that I be as strong as I can be in state and nationally, so thank you for the support. In the committees on which I serve, I try to make sure that I first focus on creating jobs in Delaware and in the United States by strengthening manufacturing, by working for things that give small business people access to credit and to a skilled workforce, and by fighting for access to markets around the world. Second, I try to do things that protect and defend inventions, innovations, and creativity, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about that. I spent way too much time in the private sector working for a company that invents things and is a global company, and that tends to focus some of my views. A truly global company that for 50 years has had operations from the Indian subcontinent to Japan to Europe to the United States. But the things that are most challenging and concerning to me really are the things in front of us in the Foreign Relations Committee. The United States is in an important moment where a majority of Americans would like to see us withdraw from the world, and where our actions in the Middle East and in other regions of the world have left lots of our allies questioning whether we are still interested in and engaged in the world. The leading candidate for the Republicans for 2016 for president is Rand Paul. There was a big conference that just concluded where he was overwhelmingly their favorite. And there's no question about his view on the international stage, which is that we should withdraw. I understand how the average American, certainly the average Delawarean, is very tired after a long conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan that is extremely expensive. But for us to send the mistaken impression that our values and our priorities are no longer important to us in the world, whether it's in the challenge with Iran or the challenge in Ukraine, or whether it's in South Asia, for the United States to not be an active partner in the interests of the private sector, in the interests of advancing America in the world, I think is an enormous mistake. Last comment I'll make, and then I'd welcome your questions. I had dinner with Penny Pritzker 2 weeks ago. We were talking about an initiative in Africa, Power Africa, that I've been pressing the Commerce Department on. And we talked about how they need more resources, and she was asking for more funding for the Foreign Commercial Service, which helps connect the United States and countries all over the world. And I pressed her on one thing. I said, we have a unique advantage in the United States that Russia doesn't have, that China doesn't have, that Brazil doesn't have, that virtually every one of our major competitors that we were talking about at this dinner doesn't have, which is the diaspora community. We have an incredibly well-educated, well-connected, well-grounded diaspora community in the United States that can be our ability to connect, whether it's in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, whether in India or in places in Africa. And we make it so hard. There's no clear pathway for that. There's an annual conference I've spoken at, but it's modest and it's not well-resourced. And there aren't clear doors of entryway into the Department of Commerce and State, USAID, USTR, that say you are American, you are capable, you are connected, and you are our greatest resource. Let's work together. That's something of real interest to me, and I hope I'll talk about that as well today. So, with that, I hope I'm not overstaying my welcome with some very energetic speakers. If he'd like to add some comments, I got to tell you, he's a better speaker than I am. I'm very grateful for your support and hospitality today, and I welcome your questions. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Mike Beeson. I live in Ocean Township. On the way over here, I saw your picture on CNN with a quote about the president's handling of Ukraine. And I just want to know your view, that you said that the president looks a little weak. And I sort of agree with that. And I'm just wondering, where do we go from here with Putin and that relationships? And, you know, it's kind of a scary time. You hear people talking about marshaling troops, and I'd be curious about your view.
Two things, if I could. My attack comment, which a number of conservative bloggers have taken out of context and blown out of proportion to other things, was that for the United States and for our place in the world, when a red line is drawn and a red line is demonstrably crossed, and then we fail to take action, especially in the Middle East, I think, both our allies and our opponents draw the conclusion that we, as a country, lack the will to engage in the world. So it has been cast as a direct criticism of the president, and I did not intend it that way.
I'm sure it is.
The Foreign Relations Committee, under Chairman Menendez's leadership, took a very hard vote to authorize the president to strike Syria after it had been demonstrably proven that they used chemical weapons, that Bashar al-Assad had used chemical weapons to massacre thousands of his own people, in clear violation of international law and of treaties. Is it better if the chemical weapons within Syria are removed peacefully? Yes, absolutely. But if we send the signal within Syria And I traveled to a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan last January, which was a very difficult experience and conversation. And I had a woman who was a kindergarten teacher who had lost most of her family say to me, when your country says there is a red light against using chemical weapons on us, on civilians, what you are also saying is the green light to using cluster bombs, barrel bombs, and Scud missiles, and jet fighters, all of which have been used against schools and bread lines and mosques. The Assad regime has done horrible things and killed more than 130,000 of our own people. I think we should be more strongly engaged in Syria. That is a very unpopular position, broadly, in the United States. So that was not meant as a direct criticism of the president only, but also of all of us as a society. I think we need to rethink our willingness to engage. We are just past the closing ceremonies of the Sochi Olympics. Putin spent more money on those Winter Olympics than every previous Winter Olympics to make this Potemkin village of Sochi look so perfect and so beautiful for the world. But I'll remind you, in the opening ceremonies, there was this moment, you may remember, where there were, like, the Olympic rings were going and one of them failed, and the entire populace of Russia didn't see that. It was seen by the outside world, but not within Russia. And we were talking about this before. Allison suggested to me that is a reminder of just how controlling the Russian government is. Russia and Putin will act aggressively in their own interest, as they did in 2008, as they will again in the future. If we fail to lead in partnership with our European allies, if we fail to demonstrate a muscular multilateralism here, I think Putin takes the wrong conclusion that he can keep sort of snapping up little pieces of former Soviet republics and reattaching them to Russia. I think after Crimea, Odessa will be next. After Odessa, Moldova. Well, I mean, the conversations are already happening that this is a Russian. There are Russian enclaves all around the periphery of the former Soviet Union where Russians were resettled or relocated over the previous 50 years. This has some very disconcerting echoes of previous European history. And I think it's very important for us to be strong, but to also be clear and to give Putin an off-ramp to de-escalate. I hope I answered your question. Please.
Thank you. How you said you are...
Keep seats down front.
Sure. Your main job and what you have done is creating jobs. And as we look outside what is happening in the world, but what is happening inside in our country here. I'm a local pharmacist. I have few drugstores in Monmouth County. And when I joined my practice 20 years ago, we had about 1,500 drugstores. They're down to 800 small mom and pop stores.
Yes.
What is your input and what is your thoughts on CMS putting new regulations in 2 days about giving those big dollar items and rights of patient education, when I mean to say immunizations, when I mean also medication therapy management, to big box stores, to PBMs controlled mail order pharmacies. What are we gonna do? If we go out of business, there will be 800 pharmacies in New Jersey will be closed tomorrow. There will be about 2,400 independent pharmacies would not have job. There will be about 12,000 technicians and delivery drivers who transport the healthcare system in New Jersey would not have job. I'm also a chairman of New Jersey Pharmacists PAC, and I represent the state. And when that bill comes to on your desk, saying no will be helping small independent pharmacies and keeping them alive. Because right now, if we call any chain drugstore, my open challenge to you, you'll be on hold for 3 to 4 minutes. A pharmacist will be 7 minutes away to talk to you. When you call my drugstore or any independent drugstore in New Jersey, that even the host uses it, you will be one step away from talking to pharmacists in 30 seconds. We know we are mom and pop store. We know our community. We know what happened to their dog. We know what happened to their kitchen. I changed the batteries of my patients. So how would you help us?
First, I need to know more about the regulatory impact of the decision that you're saying CMS is 2 days away from making.
Yes.
Generally, in my own community, I have seen consolidation. Someone I was with actually yesterday, he and his father started a very successful chain of pharmacies in Delaware. Famous in Delaware, but I think unknown outside of our immediate area. And one of the things that Happy Harry's, their drugstore chain, was very famous for was great service. I mean, wonderful service. And I'm close to the family. They grew it and grew it and grew it over a number of years, but it's now been purchased by Walgreens. And the transition, this is where I get, my family has gone to the Happy Harry's literally 5 minutes from our house for years. And the change in service levels and response times and engagement was very distressing to the family that had sold it, and distressing, I think, to many of the customers and patients. We really have no option now. It's either CVS or Walgreens, that's it. Because CVS has bought several large ones and Walgreens has bought several, and it's really those two now. This is not that dissimilar to the Walmart, Costco versus grocery stores, hardware stores, furniture stores. And we have a tension between reducing price for consumers and reducing community groundedness and customer and patient intimacy. And what a pharmacist is doing is delivering you're not just selling light bulbs.
Sure.
Right? You're delivering healthcare.
Sure.
And people rely on you. You're among the most trusted of healthcare professionals. Sure. People rely on a nurse and a pharmacist to help them actually understand exactly what medication you're supposed to take on what timeline, what are the impacts, and to catch, right, the problems when you've got this. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I have members of my family on, 7, 8, 9 medications, and managing all of that is very important. Keeping patients on their medication